Who wants to borrow money off? Great.
So generous.
Okay, good morning. It is Friday, April 21st, 2023, and this is the third section of our meeting this morning. We are shifting gears and going to Bill H67, an act relating to household products and hazardous waste substances. So to help us get rolling, invited a number of witnesses in this morning. Our first guest will be Mr. Burns. If you could join us at the table and talk to us about the merits of H67 as you see it. Thanks.
Certainly. Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Paul Burns. I'm the Executive Director of VPIRG, the Vermont Public Interest Research Group. It is a pleasure to testify before you this morning. And at less before 10:30, already your third session. You're hard at work. We all appreciate that, and I appreciate the work you've been doing, obviously, on a number of other bills. My testimony here on H67 will be pretty brief, and I hope at more of a 20 or 30,000 foot level to provide you with our overall opinion, our strong support for this legislation, and you will be hearing from other witnesses who have greater expertise in this area. And so I'll just start off and say, I encourage you to hold your very specific questions for the experts to follow. But in broad strokes, VPIRG strongly supports the idea that those who create a mess should clean it up. And that holds true for all sorts of programs, from those that you learned in kindergarten right through to the federal Superfund program and our various laws and policies that Vermont has passed along the lines of extended producer responsibility, including our mercury lighting legislation that this committee recently worked on and helped to pass, which created then a model for other states to follow. Turning specifically to EPR programs, VPIRG again has, Vermont has been a leader here, and VPIRG has been part of a number of these efforts. So from the bottle bill to electronics, again, the mercury lighting products, thermostats, paint, and batteries, these are all areas where Vermont has established extended producer responsibility programs. They've been important ways to ensure that we're collecting materials that would otherwise end up as litter in the environment or as toxic threats to the environment or to human health. So I think the benefits of EPR, there are at least two major ones that I would think of. One is that we're minimizing the environmental and public health threats of the materials that are collected under these programs. And two, we're putting the burden of paying for the collection, recycling, and or disposal of these materials on those who sell the product or material to begin with, rather than on consumers or taxpayers who are too often today left holding the bag. When it comes to household hazardous waste, it may mean something different to anybody that you ask, but I'll just tell you how the EPA considers it, defines it. They consider it to be leftover household products that can catch fire, react, or explode under certain circumstances, or that are corrosive or toxic. Those are the areas of materials and products that we consider to be, the EPA considers to be household hazardous waste. These include products such as paints, cleaners, oils, batteries, pesticides, and others that contain hazardous ingredients that require the special care in terms of disposal. The local collections that happen today for these materials are important, but they are typically infrequent and they are always costly for local communities, meaning local taxpayers. That means that household hazardous waste is not today in Vermont always collected in a proper way. It may be disposed of improperly, and that then can lead to environmental threats and public health threats and polluted water and so forth. A system of regular collection and proper disposal or recycling that is paid for by the producers of household hazardous waste can address these problems. And that's why fundamentally we think this is a good way to go. While these programs are uncommon for household hazardous waste in the US today, the concept of EPR, extended producer responsibility, is, as you know, catching on rapidly. And again, Vermont has been something of a leader among states in this area. But it's even more common in Canada. A number of provinces in Canada have quite extensive EPR programs for different materials. I was just looking, I think Manitoba had 14 different separate EPR programs, different collection programs set up for different kinds of materials, and household hazardous waste was just one of those 14 systems that they have set up. Other Canadian provinces are also collecting household hazardous waste today. So while this is might be considered innovative in the US, it is not a program without model elsewhere, the program that is envisioned in H67 here. Others can speak, I think, more to the effectiveness of the Canadian programs. I encourage you to consider those if you are so desirous. And so again, I think, Janet Holiday's here from Chittenden Solid Waste District. This is an issue where there is a lot of broad agreement among those of us concerned about the environment. An organization like VPIRG is both a consumer and an environmental organization. And so we approach an issue like this from those two perspectives. No question that doing a better job of collecting these materials and preventing them from getting inappropriately into the environment is a good thing in and of itself. But doing it in a way where you have regular collections that people can know about, good public education programs, that means you're getting the most of that material as possible, and doing it in a way where the expenses are paid for by the person or entity or corporation that made the product, that sold the product, and that profited from the product. Also, I think is just the fair way of doing it. And so, and certainly better from a consumer standpoint, rather than having, again, that burden fall on taxpayers in these cases. So a taxpayer-funded infrequent program, while I applaud the solid waste district for doing everything they can so far to try to address this issue, it's not the ideal model. Something more like H67, where manufacturers are stepping up more with a more regular system of collection, more comprehensive capacity to collect these materials and then treat them effectively. I think it just makes sense. So boil down from both a consumer and environmental perspective, that's why VPIRG is in support of the concepts contained in H67.
Thank you, Mr. Burns. Senator White.
Thank you, Chair Bray. Could you talk a little bit about where Vermont stands in this conversation nationally? I like to think that we're always a leader on this type of stuff, but we probably wouldn't be here if we were with a bill like this.
Well, actually, I think we have been a leader, and I say that not with just like Vermont is special in every way, but we have had, the programs that I mentioned for extended producer responsibility that Vermont already has for some of the items that we see before us on the table with electronics and and so forth, the thermostats and what used to be mercury lights. There are few states, I can say that with confidence, who are ahead of us in the diversity of EPR programs that we already have. As I say, I think we're a little bit behind the Canadian provinces in this area, at least some of them. And I don't know, others can speak to this, I don't know of another state, honestly, that has put an EPR program for household hazardous waste into place yet. I don't know of another US state, although I'd be happy to be corrected on that. But I know it's not common in any case. And so it's not as though we're falling behind. I really think Vermont has been pretty innovative in this area.
Well, I would just say one of the first presentations I heard from Senator Bray before I knew him well was at a national conference about extended producer responsibility. And while it wasn't specific to household hazardous waste, that was a question someone asked, was they were considering it in other locations. So the concept really makes sense for all types of products, and especially for the ones that can have side effects.
I totally agree. It really does make sense, I think, from both a consumer and environmental perspective and public health perspective.
And to your point, you remind me, I forgot about that. That's years ago. We've been plugging away at this. I think this is maybe our third round of trying to get there. So third time is the charm.
So your next presentation at the conference will be.
It's a FedEx.
Yes.
Okay. Great. So there are no other questions for Mr. Burns. Let's go.
Thank you very much.
So we have with us joining remotely, Mr. Cassell. Good to see you again. Thanks for joining us. I think the last time I saw you in person was we were looking at EPR for packaging more broadly. Pre-COVID, feels like a long time ago.
It was a long time ago, and I wish I was there in person now, but I really appreciate the opportunity to do this virtually here from Boston. So thank you, and Chair Bray, Vice Chair Watson, members of the committee. My name's Scott Cassell. I'm the CEO and founder of the Product Stewardship Institute, or PSI, and I'm here, as Paul is, and others, to testify in support of H67. Our organization is a national nonprofit. We've worked for the past 22 years to reduce the health and environmental impact for over 25 consumer products, including household hazardous waste, or HHW. And we've worked very closely with many of you in Vermont on the products. I think there's 8 EPR laws that you have in Vermont. You're definitely one of the leaders up there. I think it's Vermont and California, the 2 leads for all the EPR laws passed and the experience. And I've appreciated the opportunity to work with John Leddy and Jan Holliday and many others on this. So I wanted to start by just saying that maybe the obvious, that HHW is not a new problem. We've known about the dangers from hazardous household products by going in the trash, down the drain, at least since 1983. The reason I know that is because that's when I started my first job for a nonprofit organization in Philadelphia. And one of my jobs was to answer the phone on household hazardous waste. We had a whole program on it. It was very big then. And it was the first time of awakening about the dangers of these products. I later used that experience to become president of a national organization that focused specifically on the proper handling, safe handling of these products. It's called NAMA, North American Hazardous Materials Management Association. And then I was also the waste policy director in Massachusetts, where I got to meet Paul down here in Massachusetts for a time, and developed one of the first manuals for, it's actually a household hazardous waste master plan that we developed here in Massachusetts, based on the priorities, the toxicity, the volume, the costs of managing these materials. So we've looked at these for a really long time. And my point here is not to, say all the experience. It's really to say that I wouldn't have spent so much time on this if it wasn't such a big problem. And it is a big problem to many, many others as well. But the bottom line is we've really failed to reduce the potential harm caused by these products. They are hazardous materials. If generated by a business, they would be regulated as a hazardous waste under the Resource Conservation and Recovery Act federally. And the only reason the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency did not regulate HHW is because of the impossibility of regulating tens of millions of individual households. US EPA still recommends that these products be collected and managed and paid for. They just don't provide the funding. And of course, Vermont's governments don't have the funding to do the job that they know how to do. And as was mentioned by Paul before, that this is only fair. We know extended producer responsibility is not only for packaging, and I hope it does come here to Vermont as well. It's not only for all the other products like electronics, thermostats, fluorescent lamps, and paint and other products. It is the responsibility of the producers, because otherwise they will continue, these products like HHW will continue to be hazards in the community, public health threats, threats in the packer trucks, the collection trucks that go around, transfer stations, and other waste facilities. So to solve this problem, you need to have a law based on H67. So you have the chance, I'd say right now, to be a national leader. To your question before, Vermont and Oregon are the two states we have worked with, working closely with both state and local officials in both states to develop a piece of legislation like this. Oregon had one as well, and they are looking at this as a top product. I just got off the phone with some officials from France. They were very interested in our program specifically on household hazardous waste, and they have like 30 different products under EPR and world leaders, and they're looking here for Vermont as that leader as well. So HHW is no different from these other products that you've already managed. It's costly, it's toxic, and it shouldn't be in the waste stream. Lastly here, let me just touch on the Canadians, which was mentioned before. HHW programs for under EPR systems has been operating successfully in Canada since the 1990s. All right, we've got 30 years of experience there. And in the past few years, it's expanded to 2 new provinces based on that success. So there's 5 provinces now in Canada with HHW EPR programs. British Columbia, which has had one of the longest programs, Manitoba, Ontario, Saskatchewan, and Alberta. And just 2 data points as a result of those programs, British Columbia increased their collection volumes 9% annually, year after year, from 2010 to 2016. And Manitoba increased collection volumes 419% in the first 5 years of the program from 2012 to 2017. So these programs work. They provide the funding, they provide the structure. They're very similar to these other EPR laws that you've already passed. There's experience for managing these types of programs in Vermont and in Canada and in other places of the world. So I think I'll stop here and see if you have some questions.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I didn't quite catch what you were saying, that if these, what the federal government might otherwise do if it were more practicable, like you were saying that these materials would be regulated by EPA and of necessity and because of their characteristics, but it's simply that they can't affect every household in the United States through a national policy, that they haven't stepped up that way. I didn't quite follow that one.
Yeah, so the main point there was one is that the same chemicals are in household hazardous waste as they are in large businesses and industrial wastes that are regulated under the Federal Resource Conservation and Recovery Act. So that they should be collected, they should be managed, but they're unregulated only because it's not possible to regulate from so many households. And as a result, there's more of a problem from those. Not to say that we shouldn't reduce, that they're not reducing toxicity. Of course they are for, businesses and industrial facilities, but these are unregulated right now. And unless, the local governments in Vermont are doing a great job in collecting these right now, they have to, because it's not, there's no other way to do it, but they don't have the funding to do it properly.
Okay, great, thank you. So under RCRA, the EPA does regulate for industrial and business these same chemicals when in industry and business, but it's
Right.
at the household level when they're in a consumer product that they're not being addressed yet.
Correct.
Got it, thank you. Any committee questions for Mr. Casale? Senator McCormick.
So I know that, for example, the community I live in has periodic toxic pickups. and it's warned weeks in advance, and then you gather all these up. Is that just sort of ad hoc? Some communities do it, some don't.
Yes, exactly. This is where we're leaving it up to the residents, the town officials, and their ability to fund these programs and to vie for other important government functions. No government is doing the 100% job, or at least, attempting. You're never going to get 100%, but no one's doing the job that needs to be done because no one has that money, and some don't have any money for this or choose not to. And it's more of a problem. So yes, this is what it is. They're ad hoc, they're Band-Aid approaches, and we know that EPR programs offer a network of accountability. It's not only the producers that are involved in this, it's the collectors, it's the local governments, the state governments, it's others. It provides I call it a network of accountability because it's a real system. Right now, there is no system. It's relying on the financial ability and the wherewithal for individual counties and towns in order to do this.
Thank
That's
you.
all.
All right. Seeing no further questions, thanks so much for joining us this morning. It's sunny in Boston.
Thank you very much for having me.
And with that, we'll go to Mr. Letty. Good morning, Mr. Letty. Thank you too for coming back. You're a frequent flyer for us. So if you can introduce yourself and then help us understand the impacts of household hazardous waste for your operation and the members that you represent.
Excellent. Thank you, Chairman Bray and members of the Senate Natural Resources and Energy Committee. Thank you for having me. My name is John Letty. I am the Executive Director of the Northwest Solid Waste District in Vermont. We are located in Franklin and Grand Isle counties and provide municipal waste planning and services for all the residents of those two counties. I'm also the director of the Vermont Solid Waste District Managers Association. And so working with a group of solid waste district managers across the state to, really pool our collective knowledge and discuss, we're a professional group to, really discuss the waste shed in Vermont and how we all manage it. And HHW does take up a fair amount of our time. We operate the Northwest Solid Waste District, that is, operates a household hazardous waste collection program. And it was, I think, asked just a moment ago whether household hazardous waste collections are ad hoc. And you will find there's a variety of different programs and collection methods throughout the state. But there are some standards that the state passes down to municipalities in Vermont. And that's through the state's material management plan and through every municipality or entity in Vermont has to create a solid waste implementation plan. And that states that every community has to have at least 2 household hazardous waste collection days a year. And the way that some communities meet that need is by having 1-day event, 2 1-day events, usually one in the spring, one in the fall. And as I don't see other districts who are smaller on the agenda for today, I will say that the cost of those 1-day events has increased significantly in the past 5 years. And there are, in addition to the cost of disposal of these items, there's setup costs for the events. And there are towns that are currently paying $15,000 for one event per year. So for both of their events, that's getting close to $30,000. And that is an unsustainable cost for small communities in Vermont. We're lucky, the Vermont Northwest Solid Waste District, we cover a larger area and have a little bit more resources than either small towns or even smaller districts. So our household hazardous waste program operates a permanent collection facility located in Georgia, Vermont at our main recycling facility. We're open by appointment 5 days a week for the collection of household hazardous waste. We also operate remote collection events that our own staff, we don't contract out for these events, but our own staff operate them. And we have 6 remote collection events for those residents that are further away from our permanent facility, so that, they might have a convenient opportunity to dispose of the hazardous waste that they generate in their house. And we and solid waste district managers in the state think this is extremely important because, as you've heard, the items that we consider household hazardous waste are the most toxic and dangerous products that are in our waste shed. They are harmful to the environment and to individuals, and people need a safe way to get rid of them that is also cost effective. I think our programs are successful. We serve just around 1,500 households per year with our household hazardous waste programs. We collect just over 50 tons of household hazardous products each year. But the cost of those services and our operations are relatively efficient compared to some others in the state. But if you were to break down that cost, it would be over $50 per participating household. So imagine pulling up to a household hazardous waste event, trying to get rid of some paint, your oven cleaner, things like that, and being charged $50 to do that. That is a prohibitive cost. Some people definitely are willing to pay what they understand the severity of these items and the need to handle them properly, and they'll pay that. But a lot of people won't or can't, and that leads to them putting them in the trash or pouring them down the drain, or pouring them on the ground. And those are improper methods of disposal that are just going to lead to environmental contamination. Even putting these items in the landfill are going to contaminate the leachate in the landfill. They're going to leach into groundwater. Municipal wastewater treatment facilities aren't built to manage these types of environmental pollutants. They're meant to manage, human pathological, biological, not chemical wastes, not used oil, things like that. So these are, improper disposal. That is what people will turn to, and that's just leading to groundwater contamination, drinking water contamination, environmental contamination. So environmental or extended producer responsibility shifts that cost from the point of drop off to the point of sale, and it spreads it out so that it's a small fee that when people go to buy these products, they don't necessarily notice, but it encourages them to dispose of them the right way when they go to dispose of them. The Northwest Solid Waste District participates in a number of EPR programs. You've heard about them this morning. Electronic waste, mercury-containing bulbs, batteries, paint, and they've all been extremely successful. As each new EPR law has come into effect, we have collected more of that material, and we're able to do so in a way that, it affects our bottom line, which allows us to spend our resources to tackle new waste solutions and new programs. So we're extremely happy with all our participation in all of the other extended producer responsibility programs in the state. And we really look forward to an extended producer responsibility program for household hazardous waste. And that's my testimony. Welcome to answer any questions.
Great, well, that was very helpful to ground it in what's going on now without such an EPR program and the costs associated with the challenges. So thanks for that. You mentioned that some districts, you are the director of the Vermont Solid Waste District Managers Association, but that, not every district is the same. Can you say a little bit about, and we will hear more testimony, but can you give us a sense of the range of other challenges that aren't necessarily something that you're seeing, but that we should make ourselves aware of?
Yes. So the District Managers Association is made up of solid waste districts, waste alliances, which are more loosely connected, but still groups of communities that have come together to manage their waste, as well as some individual towns that aren't members of districts, since every town has its responsibility to collect household hazardous waste, whether they're in a district or not, individual towns, alliances, districts, they're all, performing these functions at different levels. I think the challenge is, as the entities get smaller, they are forced to participate, well, not forced, but they are participating in one-day collection events. I think the challenges with those events, one of the biggest ones now is a limited number of contractors that provide that service. It leads to, there's a lack of competition in the state, and that's causing the high prices that we're seeing for these collection events, $15,000 to $20,000 per event. And when those events are pulling in 150 to 200 participants, you're looking at extremely high costs for low participation rates. But those costs are being borne by these local communities. And I really would encourage the committee to reach out to some of the independent towns and other districts and alliances that are holding these one-day events that are serviced by contractors, to hear from them.
Yeah.
We'll
we will do a list of folks to get in contact with. And if I may, I think I'll probably check in with you to make sure that we're getting kind of a representative sample before we finish scheduling witnesses on the bill.
Great.
Can you remind us of the law around the requirement to handle these materials? Is it that solid waste districts are a form of municipality, or is it actually just a municipal town by town requirement? Who has the obligation to manage waste?
Yeah, so the obligation is that each town is responsible to manage solid waste in general, including household hazardous waste. And there are special requirements for household hazardous waste, like having 2 collection events per year. The towns can then join a union municipal district. And then the burden, once a town has joined a solid waste district, then the burden falls on the solid waste district to service all of its member towns.
Great, thank you for that. Any other committee questions for Mr. Leddy? Senator Watson?
Thank you. So just to clarify,
So it's each town is responsible to have 2 collection days per year. And then that could be rolled into the Union Municipal District if they're a member.
Yeah, so as a member of a district, the district then has to have 2 collection events. And those events, there are certain parameters that the event or the permanent facility have to be within a certain distance. So say, we're Franklin and Grand Isle counties. If we had 2 events in Montgomery, that wouldn't necessarily cover our responsibility to the residents of North Hero, because those are more than 20 miles apart. So.
Got you. Thank you. That's helpful.
All right. Thank you again, Mr. Letty. And with that,
Actually, I do have one more question.
oh, yeah, please.
Sorry. Thank you. So is it your hope that if this passes, that the collection days would still happen, but they'd be paid for by the manufacturers, or that the collection system in general would change?
My hope is that the collection system changes. I think, let me take a second here. Yes, my hope is that within our district, the collection system stays the same. I think our permanent facility services our residents very well. It's convenient. We have, our remote events for those that are farther away. I see we would continue to do that. My hope is that the costs are covered for these services by the manufacturers. Now, that's not to say that if the manufacturers can and are willing to come in to create a new system that is better than our system, they can do that. I would happily turn this over and turn my attention to something else if manufacturers can create a better system. And in other parts of the state, they might. But my experience with extended producer responsibility programs has been that the producers use the system that's in place and then pay for those systems. Now, there are improvements in that process. The manufacturers are responsible for education and outreach. And I think, a statewide approach with more money will improve outreach. It'll improve the individual household and individual residents' knowledge of these programs and how to properly manage these things. So I think, there are ways to improve them for sure. And so I think there will be improvement.
Great.
In an EPR
Thank you
system.
very much.
Thank you.
Any other community questions for Mr. Letty? All right, so thank you again and good to see you.
Good to see you all. Thank you again.
Let's go to Ms. Holliday. Good morning. Thank you for coming in.
Yes, thank you for having me. It's nice to be in person here. For the record, I'm Jen Holliday. I'm the Director of Public Policy and Communications for the Chittenden Solid Waste District. I'm also a founding member and chair of the Vermont Product Stewardship Council, and we were formed back in 2008. Our membership is most of the SWME, solid waste management entities, and we formed in 2008 to specifically work on extended producer responsibility legislation that included the paint, the electronics, the mercury bulbs, the batteries, mercury thermostats, and we are leaders in the state for EPR. I think Scott Cassell's organization keeps track of this. I think we're either second or third in the number of products that we have EPR programs for, and these EPR programs are incredibly successful. We collect more per capita in every one of these categories that EPR covers than any other state in the United States. So I attribute that to some really good legislation that you all have worked on and passed. And
Now, did you mean that Chittenden County solid waste is advanced in the state, or did you mean Vermont as a state compared to the nation?
Vermont as a state
Okay.
because of all of these.
Yeah, okay.
Yes.
But I'm sure you're
yes.
up there too.
Yes, we are proud to be up there as well, but Vermont as a whole, which I think is fabulous. I'm also a board member and past president of the Product Stewardship Institute, which is Scott Cassell's organization. And the Vermont Product Stewardship Council has collaborated quite a bit with them on EPR for household hazardous waste. It's been a top priority for the SWMEs for 9 years. And this is the 4th fill. And you've heard a lot about why it's such a priority. 2 of the bills have passed the House at various times, and provided a handout to you that looks like this about, why this is an important issue. So I'll go into a little bit more detail about that. It's been covered by others too. Again, it's the most toxic part of the waste stream. It requires special handling, special staff to manage it. And there's no end disposal facilities in the state of Vermont. All of this stuff goes out of state. It's all shipped out of state. Some of it as far away as Texas, which has its own environmental implications of burying it or destroying it or incinerating it and far away. So SWMEs have been struggling for years, particularly those that are doing these one-day events, to meet the requirements of the state, the mandate to do these collections. They do their best with their limited resources, but we really have to do better. We need producers to help with that. According to the state 2018 waste characterization study, 855 tons of household hazardous waste are buried in the landfill every year. So we really do need to do better and increase our collection. And 2 one-day events are not enough. Yeah.
Is there a part that stuff gets buried in the landfill in addition to what is collected, or the
Correct.
stuff that gets collected doesn't get
We
touched?
do not send it to the
Oh,
Coventry landfill. No. This is what people don't manage properly.
Stuff doesn't even get collected.
Right. Age 67 puts this responsibility on the manufacturers and producers who profit from these products and takes it out of the hands of the taxpayers and the local municipalities. It also provides an incentive for the manufacturers to produce less toxic products because they wouldn't have to be handled with special treatment.
It's a huge.
It would protect the solid waste workers by there being less in the trash, and it's also going to obviously protect the environment. So I'll give a quick overview of kind of what's going on in the state, and then talk specifically about CSWD's collection program. And I just want to point out too that when we're talking about household hazardous waste collection, it's important to know that that's also including small businesses. That's also part of these collection programs. So they're technically called very small quantity generators. They generate less than about 220 pounds per month, and it's a lot of businesses in the state of Vermont. It's things like schools, it's contractors, it's small manufacturers. So when we're talking about these collection programs, it includes these businesses. And this bill covers consumer products, and a lot of these businesses use consumer products. So it would help those businesses as well, because they wouldn't have a cost associated with disposing of them at these collection events. Most collection events and permanent programs charge these businesses for disposal. Most do not charge for the residential disposal, as was indicated by John Lenny. Why? Because it would be such a high price tag. And a lot of consumers wouldn't do the right thing, but businesses generally are doing, they do participate and they do pay.
So
So,
does that mean the net effect would be that businesses would see a reduced cost because the pool of materials getting recycled and handled properly is going to be bigger?
so the businesses will see a reduced cost because this bill, the way that the materials is defined that are covered, they're consumer goods. And if you think about businesses and what they purchase to do some of their business contractors, they are consumer goods. So they will actually have most of the costs covered when they participate with these consumer goods. Now, if they have an industrial chemical, that's not covered under this bill. But if they have some of the other, Drano, like property managers have Drano, we get lots of property managers, they're technically a business. And we charge them. So that is, it's helpful for the small businesses in Vermont as well. I just wanted to make that point. So as was stated, the Agency of Natural Resources requires towns and SWMEs, basically those that are accepting the responsibility for solid waste management. They at a minimum have to provide these 2 collection events. It used to be 4. And because of the escalating costs and the inability to pay this, the SWMEs requested that the number of events be reduced, and the state reduced it to 2. There are currently 7 permanent collection facilities. Those are the SWMEs that don't provide these one-day collection events, or they have mobile events in tandem with them.
And do those tend to be, I would assume, larger towns? I think Hartford has.
We have Addison County, Chittenden County, the Northeast Solid Waste District, Rutland County. Those are the oldest programs. There's a few new ones now too. I think Wyndham has just moved to a permanent type of situation. I can't recall all of them, but they're districts. They are clearly solid waste districts because they're the ones that can generate the revenue in the infrastructure.
And for people who are following, you were using the term swimming, and I'm not sure everyone will know what that is.
So that stands for solid waste management entities. And so it includes solid waste districts. There's also solid waste alliances that don't have the ability to tax, but they're a group of towns that have formed an alliance to meet their needs. And then there's the individual towns. I think there's only 4 left that just are out on their own implementing solid waste plans, and they're a SWME. So there's 26 SWMEs, and 19 of them provide these 2-day events, and 7 of them have permanent programs.
We're about to pass the Northeast Kingdom Solid Waste Management District. Oh, there's some allowances we're doing at GovOps. So I think that's they're unique in that sense.
Yeah.
I think they're the only one that's formed from that.
So a little bit about the CSWD's program. We started collecting household hazardous waste in 1991. We have a permanent collection program called the Environmental Depot, open year-round, 5 days a week. We also have a mobile collection program called the Rover that is a seasonal program that goes around to the different towns in our community. 11 events per year that we provide with the Rover. So as I said, we're charging businesses, residents drop off for free. And because of the level of convenience that we provide, we get a very high participation rate. We serve about 11,000 households per year, which is about 12 or 13% of the households in Chittenden County. And 12 or 13% participation doesn't sound very high, but studies show that on like recyclables and trash, people really only need to get rid of their household hazardous waste once every 7.4 years.
Ah.
So if you multiply 13% by 7.4, you're up there in the 90% collection rates. Our own employees staff this collection program. Over the 30 years that we've been doing it, we've collected more than 16 million pounds of hazardous waste, which is about 40,000 55-gallon drums of hazardous waste. And they do this by maintaining strict compliance with complex rules and regulations to protect workers and the environment. So, you know, they're like mini chemists. They have to really know what they're doing, wear proper PPE. It's an uncomfortable job. It's a messy job. And you never know what you're going to get on any given day. We've had people come in with, you know, crazy things like, you know, a fake hand grenade or, you know, all kinds of bottled animal specimens. And yeah, so it's just, you just don't know, being on that receiving end, you have no idea what's going to come in from a household. And we've had like these chemists that have retired from businesses in our community that have hauled home all kinds of dangerous material. So it's a very challenging program to manage. So the cost of our program in FY22 was about $784,000. And this was partially offset by revenue from the EPR programs for paints and batteries and mercury devices, leaving us with a net cost about $545,000. We also get a grant from the Agency of Natural Resources. Our disposal costs alone were $220,000, and that's with our own staff and our own labor consolidating it and managing it. So we expect our expenses to go up to about $350,000 in FY24 because our contractor that hauls it away has increased their pricing by 35%.
Who is that?
It's US Ecology, and they're located in Williston. And as John pointed out, one of the major problems is we just don't have a lot of service providers in Vermont to do this work. This is the only one in state that does the work, and there's a couple outside state, but the swimmies that do events, they're struggling to find ones that will even hold an event. And as you heard, the costs are even higher than what we are experiencing at our permanent facilities. So breaking down our disposal costs, we're looking at it about $1,140 per ton to manage this material. And that's, if you want some perspective, we pay about $125 per ton for trash that's collected at our drop-off center for disposal. So $1,140 per ton. And you can understand why. It's a hard to manage material. It has to go out of state, has to be incinerated somewhere special or otherwise treated. So I too recommend you talk to some of the swimmies that are doing these one-day events. They have a whole different perspective, a more dire issue around what they're trying to do. I will say that this bill, it's been said in the past that this is a complicated bill. It's really not that complicated. I developed a one-pager. You have that as well. Jude has posted that explains how this bill would work. And it is really formulaic to the other EPR laws that we have in place today that have been so successful. There is no fee at retail. Consumers will not see an additional fee at the point of purchase of these products. It's called cost internalization. So the product if the consumer goes out, they'll buy their product, but the producers have to pay for this program and they have to figure out how to pay for it, but it's not through a fee that's collected at retail. So in summary, CSWD strongly supports this. I will also add that this bill has a landfill ban on household hazardous waste. It was talked about that it's not regulated by the EPA. Well, technically, household hazardous waste can be landfilled in the state of Vermont. So this bill would stop that from being permissible. And I wanted to also mention that the Rechargeable Battery Association, they have reached out and asked me and others if we could ask, I think they will ask the community themselves, but I wanted to say I support what they will be asking you, which is an exemption for rechargeable batteries in this bill. They've been around since the 70s, voluntarily collecting rechargeable batteries in the state. They want their own EPR legislation. They've been advocating that for rechargeable batteries because they have free riders, but they really want it to be specific to their free riders are producers, manufacturers. I mean, this is one of the reasons why you need this in legislation. They have a voluntary program, but what happens is not all the producers want to pay. And so they're the free riders.
I see what you're saying.
So they want legislation. They just don't want it to be in this bill. This bill doesn't cover all of their products because the EPA doesn't necessarily consider lithium ion batteries as hazardous. And that's kind of the premise of what is covered in this bill. And other materials, other hazardous, other batteries that are embedded in products. So they would like their own bill. I strongly support that as well. They've been, they just passed one, I think, in Washington State, but I do support it, that it being clarified in the definition that they're exempt. Rechargeable batteries are exempt.
So how do we know what hazardous waste is what? What's being collected? Is the person dropping it off declare what it is?
Yeah, that's a great question, because that's really, it's not easy for people to know.
Yeah.
So what we tell people is put it all in your car, bring it all to us, we'll look it over and we'll tell you, we'll educate you. But in general, what we tell people is those warning words that are on the container. If it has caution, warning, danger, then it's most likely something that we should be managing outside of the trash.
Yeah, but just chemically, you would want to manage toxin X one way and toxin Y
Oh,
a
yeah.
different way.
So that's.
Hemisphere analyze.
Yeah, yeah, so we have to categorize them two different ways. One is by EPA regulations and another is by DOT regulations, Department of Transportation. And it is like, for example, that we have categories like flammables, flammable solids, flammable liquids, corrosives, reactives. So you have to know what category these materials fall under to put it in the right container so it won't react with anything and it'll be safe to transport.
Are there codes in the commercial containers?
Yes. Oh, are there codes like on the?
When I buy something at the hardware store, in
Some,
that can or that bottle, is there a code on that?
there's no code. The warning words will sometimes say danger flammable.
Yeah, that just still doesn't tell me what it is.
No, it doesn't. The EPA definitions for hazardous waste is if it's flammable, corrosive, ignitable, poisonous, and reactive. And then there is another whole list of very specific waste streams, like, I'm trying to think of a good example. not gonna come up with it. I've been out of that House of Hazardous Waste program for a while, but it's not gonna really tell you. It might say poisonous or toxic, it might say flammable. That's not always the leading reason why we put it in this film or that. It's complicated.
Senator Watson and Senator White.
Yeah, thank you. So, chemistry kind of question, but when we say ignitable, do we also mean explosive?
Oh,
No, that's
Okay.
different.
That's different.
It's by definition, ignitable is anything that can be, you're really testing, like.
It's okay.
Hazardous, it's by definition, anything that can be ignited at a certain temperature with a source of ignition.
Okay, because that
Remember,
feels like there's overlap with flammable there, but anyway, it's,
it's a different temperature. It all has to do with temperature,
Okay.
flammable versus ignitable.
and,
Flammable is a lower temperature, so it's much more likely to catch on fire
okay,
more easily.
that's helpful. And, you mentioned that something about industrial chemicals. Are there a certain kind of like kinds of chemicals that would, or products that would not be accepted, you know, at one of these take back days because they're too,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's too something?
it's not it has to be a consumer product
Okay, so,
and meet these other definitions, and there are some exemptions. So, you know, if you have a dry cleaning solvent in a waste can, that's not a consumer product.
Yeah.
It's what you can buy in the store. One thing that's not covered is waste oil. Anything that doesn't come in the consumer packaging.
Yeah, that was
Yeah.
gonna be my question.
And there was no
That was-
way, we couldn't figure out a way around that.
so used oils, not,
It wouldn't be
Accepted.
paid for by it'd be accepted.
It would be
but
accepted.
wouldn't be part of this EPR program.
I see, got you, okay. Thank you.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
To what extent are trade secrets, do trade secret protections prevent you and us from knowing what's in things that are being disposed?
They don't, because they have to protect workers. There's worker safety regulations. You should be able to pull up an MSDS on it. It's called material safety sheet now, I think, it's material data safety sheet, and be able to see what kind of health threats that product has, or implications that product has, whether it's flammable. It has to have that information on material safety data sheets. They're not going to tell us the granular information. They just have to follow the law about, is this toxic? Is this corrosive? Is this danger to human health based on, you know, the analysis of how many rats died in the labs, that kind of thing. So we can get that information. We do request material safety data sheets sometimes. But that again, consumer products, it generally, that doesn't really touch consumer products. Most consumer products, we know pretty much what to do with.
Mr. Chairman, I was just trying to think of things in legislation that we've tried to do this or that or the next thing, and they said, well, we can't, you don't have to tell you what's in it, because it's a trade secret.
We wouldn't be able to manage it if we didn't know what the dangers were associated.
Thank you, that's not your area of expertise.
Yeah.
It's, don't send us stuff you can't drink. You know.
No, no.
So at present, where does the bad stuff end up?
It depends what it is and is where it gets sent. So it will go for incinerator, you know, it depends who the contractor is. So some contractors own their own hazardous waste incinerator, say in Illinois, and that material will go there. Most of it ends up either being blended for industrial fuel, like our blendable liquids, or incinerated. And it's, you know, we have to report that to the state every quarter. We show them the end disposal facility that it went to.
And what is the effective change at the end of the story that the bill does?
The bill will, of course, help SWMEs financially. But in this bill, it also has requirements to, for a certain level of participation. And that's key because if, for example, you have Chittenden that has 13% participation, but maybe in Wyndham, they have 2% participation, they need to step up the game. So the producer has to get that participation rate up. I think that baseline is 5% in the bill for that region. And that means that they're going to have to provide funding for more collection or provide more collection themselves. And that will, you know, result in less than 855 tons of household hazardous waste going to the landfill every year.
If the Texas company doesn't want to do that,
So the Texas company I was talking about the end disposal facility where we go and get it treated. The bill
I think
impacts
about the
the
manufacturer.
producers. So if you have a Texas company in the state of, if you have a company that produces household hazardous products in Texas, they can stop selling in Vermont, but they can't sell their product in the state. The hook in the bill is you can't sell your product here if you don't participate in this program. And that has not, it's resulted in very few companies not selling their goods in the state of Vermont.
There's no interstate commerce.
I can name one company, A&R can probably give you a couple, but Costco stopped selling batteries in their store because of the EPR law for primary batteries in the state.
Thank you very much for coming in.
Yes, thank
Good to see
you.
you again. And we'll be continuing our work, thank you for helping us get started both at the 60,000 foot level and right down to practices on the ground.